Hello, everyone. This is PamelaTopjian, and today I'm going to talk about autism, but more specifically, what people who were diagnosed later in life want you to know. So, just a little bit about autism in general before I get to what the people want you to know who have been diagnosed later in life. So, some people think that we have an epidemic of autism. But I think that really just more awareness and more open talk about it, not necessarily more cases of autism now than there used to be. One thing is completely true is that more people are being diagnosed and more adults are discovering that they are autistic as well. My husband being one of them. And he gave me full permission to share whatever I wanted here, which I will a bit later in the video. So let me just put this disclaimer out there now. I am not a doctor. Although I am a former nurse, I never worked with the autistic community specifically in my nursing career. I was a paraprofessional in the classroom for an autistic child long before I was a nurse. And I've done my fair share of reading and looking up information as well. So please don't take anything that I say as being from a professional. Just consult your own healthcare and mental health professionals, of course, right? As always. I really thought that this was something that I needed to discuss here. I've been seeing much more talk around autism, and it's just really super interesting to me. And I know that so many adults now are being diagnosed, and I just really thought it was important to discuss. So take what resonates with you and leave the rest, of course. At least I hope that this will be thought-provoking, if nothing else, as with all my videos. I put a post up in a couple different places online asking adults with later diagnosis what they think is important for people to know. And I'll read some of those responses at the end of this video. There's some really great ones. And if you're watching and you were one of those that responded, thank you so much. I'm hoping that this helps get your voices heard. There are many different things that have been tested, studied, and theorized over the years about the cause. The age of the parents, non-affectionate mothers, also known as refrigerator mothers. Sheesh. But also genetics, diet, certain over-the-counter medications, and pharmaceuticals, vaccinations, air pollution, pesticides, and so many others. There are so many different variables and overlaps, and some of these, of course, are way off. Most need more study, but personally, I don't see how it can be just one thing. We would have found it already, or even three things. It's likely a combination and not the same for everyone, since there's such a wide spectrum. So, what can be done? And should anything be done, right? Do we need to put effort into finding a quote-unquote cure? Or maybe more effort into adjusting the schools and the public places and educating the public and parents. Many higher functioning autistic people are deeply curious with a need for knowledge. And of course, then they're very smart, detail oriented and or creative and have a lot to offer the world. Some even have savant type abilities. Of course, those who are in the area of the spectrum who are in need of continuous care and who are a danger to themselves if left alone, we do need help for those people. Okay, so let's talk a little history here. Because despite popular belief, this isn't new. Now, I know I will butcher some names, so bear with me. You can look this all up yourself if you like, of course. So the term autism was first coined by Eugene Bleuler, not Bueller, Bleuler, Bleuler, in 1911 to describe the traits that he was seeing in children with schizophrenia. In 1925, Grunya Sukhareva, Sukhareva, she published detailed case studies describing autistic symptoms in children that match how we diagnose today. In 1943, Leo Kanner used the term as its own condition. In 1944, Hans Asperger, that sounds familiar, doesn't it? Described traits in children we see today in those diagnosed with autism. Up until the 60s and into the 70s, autism was being grouped in with mental illnesses and disorders, and mostly with childhood schizophrenia. Not until 1980 was autism its own diagnosis in the DSM. In the 1990s, Hans Asperger's work resurfaced, and the term Asperger's syndrome was used for more mild forms of autism. And then in 2013, the DSM combined the two along with other diagnoses to autism spectrum disorder. Another reason that we don't use the term Asperger's syndrome has to do with him having some sketchy and some would say evil connections. You can look that up yourself if you don't know and if you're interested. So, some of the reasons that adults are being diagnosed later in life is because just a couple generations ago, people didn't want their kids labeled or being treated differently in the schools. Also, they didn't want to admit something might be off or should I say just different about their children. People didn't think that kids needed to be tested just for being odd or quirky or sensitive or just different than most other kids. Schools were not as involved as they are today. Still, a lot of improvements are needed, though. But not all that long ago, a child, or even an adult, with mental illnesses were hid away. So if they suspect their child might have something going on neurologically, they didn't want to believe it or face it. Not all, of course. But unfortunately, a lot of these children were sometimes criticized, blamed, or even abused for their differences, or because they were having trouble in school, or they didn't fit in, or just couldn't get it, whatever it was. In my opinion, and I might sound a little unhinged or off the rails here a little bit, but I think that we, humans, are evolving into this new way of being. Evolution can be like 3 steps forward and 2 steps back. Some glitches or trial and error in the genetics or the species. Yeah, humans go way back, but in the bigger picture, we're still relatively new to Earth. Also, you can't dispute how terrible humans have been for the Earth and even for other humans a lot of times. In general, of course. Autistic people, more often than not, have traits that make them logical, detail-oriented, and really authentic. One of the things I've always said about part of why I fell in love with my husband was how real he was. There are never any questions. He's always been just upfront and real. He has said that learning that he was on the spectrum has helped him to realize so much about his childhood and early adulthood, and how he now understands all the masking that he's done his whole life and ways that he learned to adjust to get along with the world and with others. And others that I have that have replied to those posts I'm going to read later have said similar things. So this video was meant to discuss adults. So as promised, here's some of the responses I got asking online what adults with autism think that it's important for people to understand. Personally, I think I could have just read these. They're so great. Again, thank you to all who responded. Won't read any names or handles or anything that might be identifying to the person. I got a lot of responses, so many are similar, and I'll just read a sampling of those. So one thing, part of what somebody said was that they don't always understand joking or bantering by text, and they need people to speak intentionally and direct, but kindly. Another person said that they were diagnosed ADHD. Actually, a few people talked about being diagnosed with ADHD. as a kid, and then they were diagnosed as an adult with high-functioning autism. They said that they were shoved in a box of one-size-fits-all, which has made them have chronic anxiety and just thinking that they weren't very smart. They just needed to be taught in different ways. Another one said, kind of what my husband said, that they understood themselves better and learned a lot of coping mechanisms along the way. Let's see, others. Someone else said that they want people to know that while I might look like they're being annoying about going out to certain places or big social events, the only reason that they're saying no to these things now is that they realize they're not broken or lazy for feeling completely exhausted from them. They're just trying to respond to their body's needs after ignoring them for so long. Decades, in fact, they said. Another person thinks it's important for people to know that it's not like you see on TV, where they combine all kinds of different autism stereotypes to make one quirky or funny character that surprises everyone with their quick wit. What they don't show you is how sometimes it flat out really sucks, they said. You have days where you struggle like hell just to coexist with people. And you're very fortunate if you have someone in your life that really gets you. Another one said that the imposter syndrome is real. You know that you're not quote unquote normal, but you have flown under the radar for so long. You don't feel normal enough, but you don't feel autistic enough. Late diagnosis people can get a wave of euphoria when we finally get diagnosed. It's because there is a concrete answer and acceptance comes after that. Unlearning the imposter syndrome is something I still struggle with despite being diagnosed for a long time now. There's a lot of work into figuring out how to simply be without an idea of who or what your personhood, quote unquote, should be. Nowadays, it's easier to talk and ask about things, but this person's parents hid their childhood tests and never had anything put on medical records because they didn't want them to be treated differently. And others have said this too. But they say, I know that it came from a place of fear and protection, but I wish I would have gotten some support for things instead of being labeled just the weird kid or the sensitive kid for so long of my childhood. And when they got the results, their parents said they always knew. Another one said that so many women go undiagnosed for so long, their symptoms are different, their traits are different, and they tend to create social cliques. They can either become social outcasts, which is a risk for bullying and social isolation, or they learn to mask. There are so many women who generally do not know that they're autistic. Another one said they were masking to their own detriment, and it really took a mental and physical toll on them. The diagnosis can be a lifeline to understanding your true self and your needs, but still requires great strength and resilience to navigate the world differently now. Somebody said they wish that people in their life knew that they weren't lying. Also, while I do speak whatever social language is the norm and accepted, but it's not my native language. I'm actively translating in real time, and sometimes it takes a second. Another person said, I didn't get diagnosed because of TikTok. Someone talks about, and actually a few people talk about how that masking just to be accepted and not beat up on caused them so much anxiety and exhaustion. Someone said getting a later diagnosis or getting the diagnosis in adulthood, they have quit pretending to go along with all the BS. And while a few people talked about ADHD and being diagnosed with that as a child, and then as an adult being diagnosed with autism, they said somebody said people need to know how seriously ADHD can affect relationships. Someone said that when they were younger, they pushed and pushed, and now if they want to, they spend the entire day just reading a book or doing very little. They've learned how to rest more, sort of given themselves that permission. Another person said, now that they know being weird or having to feel like they're being fake, knowing how to talk to people face to face, getting itchy and antsy and feeling overwhelmed in high noise situations. And they say a bunch of other stuff. They know now that this is their autism and not just them being weird. Phew. There was a lot, and a lot of them had a lot of similar things to say. So I know I'm not so great at reading on here, but I hope that you got it. So, if you're an adult who is diagnosed with autism later in life, or just as an adult, can you relate with some of those comments? What would you add, or what do you think wasn't addressed here that should be? I would love to hear from you, either in the comments or even more privately. My contact information will be in the show notes, the description box below this video. I so very much appreciate you all for being here and watching until the end. And if you have a suggestion for a topic for discussion, please let me know. Check out the playlist tabs, and if you're not subscribed, please subscribe. It helps the information reach more people. And as always, I wish you so much peace, love, and healing. Thank you so much for being here.